this is Jan Reha with Career Discovery. As I mentioned in our last segment, we're going to focus on pet peeves in interviewing this segment. Kary, would you like to share one of your pet peeves?
Well, one of my biggest pet peeves are people that are not prepared to talk to me. And what I mean by that is they haven't thought about their answers. They just rattle on, and there's no rhyme or reason about it. There's no start, there's no finish, there's no conclusion, and they won't answer the question directly. If I ask somebody, why did you leave? I want an answer. I don't want 15 minutes of excuses. In fact, that's probably something that's going to knock you out because you're trying to hide something. And that's going to force the interviewer to start asking tighter and tighter and tighter questions. And if you're evasive, not a good thing. I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
I would agree. I would say one of my pet peeves that happens more so during the phone interview because you are losing a fair amount of communication is when people ramble on. Mm-hmm. they're not communicate. It's not a mutual form of communication, and that is disheartening as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that learning to be engaged and listening as an interviewee to the interviewer so that you can pick up cues and clues and respond to what they're asking. Mm-hmm. And I always encourage clients to make your responses very short and concise, rather than, especially like, how did you, what happened to your last job?
Mm-hmm. I would agree. You should have your resume sitting next to you. I can't believe how many times somebody will just, be so excited that I've called them and they're not prepared, and then I'll ask a very simple question. I've got their resume, and they don't even know what's on their resume. There's about 7 to 10 questions you get all the time in an interview. You should be ready for those. There shouldn't be any reason you can't tell me about a time when you were successful, why you want to work for the company, why did you leave your last job, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. They're the same ones you get all the time. When you could probably add to that.
And the other thing that I think is important as well, in addition to your resume, is to have a list of thoughtful questions printed up that you are going to ask the interviewer, because I think that's important as well. And there's many times when I've interviewed people and they don't have any questions.
This is one of the reasons why I require my clients to research thoroughly the company and come up with some questions as we have discussed, what's going on with the company, what seems to be the issues that they're confronting right now, and asking some very prudent questions that make the interviewer realize that they are knowledgeable about the company.
And it makes you come across as a much more serious candidate.
Do you know of any questions offhand that are really important questions that an interviewee could ask an interviewer?
I think that's a good point. There's two kinds of people that I find ask questions. There's somebody that'll ask a question because they want to sound how smart they are, and because they've researched the websites, and now they want to show you how much they know. And it's just reverberation of what was already there. But the quality of your questions directly shows the employer what you know about that level of position. So I'll use an example from my own recruiting. I work with account managers in insurance. I encourage them to ask procedural questions because it shows that they actually have worked in a department before. Or if it's a salesperson, I ask them to talk about what are the goals in the sales department? What would make them get a gold star in 6 months? What are the expectations? You want to stay away from benefits questions, raises, anything that has to do with what's in it for me. It's got to be what's in it for you as the employer at this stage. And you want to think about, once again, what is this employer's pain, and ask questions around it. The other thing is if you're dealing with a low-level manager, don't ask high-level questions because it doesn't work. Ask questions that they can answer at their level. Save those big picture questions for when you're talking to the CEO or the VP, because they're the only ones that are really going to have that answer. Remember, the person that you're talking to's level, they're trying to fill this job. And most people screw up a phone interview by talking above that level, and then you're overqualified. So you got to be really careful about that. Remember, the person you're talking to does not want you in competition with their job. So you need to make sure that you are talking about the job that is available.
So then you need to know the background of the interviewer as well,
Once
so that
again.
you know how to pitch your answers and your responses. I think one question that comes up for a lot of us is, how do you close an interview? What's an
I take that
effective way?
Having been a sales recruiter for a lot of years, number one is you never want to just say thank you for your time and shake their hand. I think what you want to do is you want to have a series of questions pre-written down, and the last question should be one that advances the opportunity. So, Danielle, I know we've only had a chance to talk today for a little while, but based on what you've learned from me, do you see any reason why we shouldn't move me forward in the process? And the way you ask the question is very important. Do you see any reason why we shouldn't allows her to say no, and you can come back and say, well, great, what's our next step? Or if she is not sure about you, she could say, well, and that causes her to maybe throw out an objection, then you can kind of keep selling yourself. Or if you're really off base, she could say, well, we're just getting started in the process, you're our first candidate. And you could say, great, not looking to rush you, but could you give me an idea of when you're going to be in a position to call people back? Once again, you're showing concern for their process, and you're also showing that you're not going to be around forever. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think on your last comment, it's important to put a time frame around it.
Absolutely. You're
That's
perishable.
really important.
You need to be perishable.
Yeah.
If you've got all the time in the world, the employer will take all the time in the world. And the bottom line is, ask for what you want.
I think one of the most difficult things for my clients is to ask for what they want. And this takes a lot of practice. And I think also it's important to write these kinds of things down. And so you have a prompt for doing that. And practice it, and practice, because to make it as natural as possible.
As fluid as possible.
Yes, as fluid as possible. This is Jan Reha with Career Discovery. In our last segment, we're going to discuss about thank you notes and follow-up. Thank you.